So we've had sex and we've had horror and we've had Disturbia, a full buffet.
And that's what Polari is about, right? That's what Polari is about, the full buffet. Every time.
Yeah. I do enjoy full buffet, not gonna lie.
My guests tonight are artist and writer Jason Ford, author and poet Golnoosh Nour, and debut author Jon Ransom. We're going to kick off with Jason. Jason, your debut book, Strange Fruit, was nominated for last year's Polari First Book Prize. It's quite an unusual book in many ways. Can you just tell us a bit about it for those who maybe aren't familiar with it?
So Strange Fruit's what I call an insta novella. I came up with the idea that as we were all sharing our lives and stories through the medium of Instagram stories, I thought, what if I actually wrote a book and published it through that? So it's a combination of visuals and music and my writing to tell a story which I was serialized through Instagram stories.
And it ended up being on our long list.
It did, which was a fantastic, exciting achievement. It was, sorry, my dog has just come in and I don't know if you can hear her, but she grumbles away. Yeah, so no, that was completely unexpected and a complete and amazing honor. There were so many talented people on the long list last year that I was genuinely so ecstatic to have made the list.
Last year, because we were doing many of our events online, we also did our writing workshops as courses run by Karen MacLeod online, and Jason was one of our participants who took part in that course.
What I really enjoyed about the Polari writing course is that Karen has this extraordinary way of just giving you giving you a little nudge to sort of think about what could I do with this story, and just you know, I think what's great is she can get either established writers, because there were established writers on the Polari course, and newbies like me, just that little spur to go, actually, you know what? I could push this further and just really get you really excited about writing again. And I cannot recommend the course enough. Love you, Karen. One of the assignments that Karen assigned us was based on a piece by John Braithwaite called I Remember. The piece that I'm going to read came out of that. And I'm still struggling with what I want to call it. At the moment, I'm kind of going with In a Galaxy Far, Far Away. So you can let me know when I finish. So when I was a kid, everything I loved was 3 3/4 inches in length. Plastic, bound on card, sealed in a blister pack. Action figures, Star Wars action figures. Mass-produced replicas of my favorite heroes and villains, each one containing 1,000 stories, 1,000 different adventures. I never left home without one, and I had many. I remember how Yoda fit in that useless little pocket in the front of your jeans. Not entirely, mind you. His head would pop up as if guiding me through life. I remember taking him everywhere. Of course, that's also how I managed to lose so many, as my mother likes to remind me to this day. And I remember how my father would bring me home a new figure every time he went on a business trip. He went on a lot of business trips. I remember my mother asking me what one did I want, and her relaying that to him over the phone in the kitchen. And I remember my disappointment when every time he brought back something completely different. I remember asking her if he did this on purpose, and I remember her saying he just wasn't very good at gifts. And I remember my friend Julie telling me that all girls want Luke Skywalker to be their boyfriend before they hit puberty, but then when they hit puberty, they only have eyes for Han. I'm not sure if that's the same for boys, as I've only ever had eyes for Luke, but I remember her saying it. And I remember I remember Jonathan telling me they had the European exclusive Death Star playset. That was the one that was a half sphere, unlike the American one, which looked more like a dark version of Barbie's dream house. He said it was in his attic, so we couldn't play with it. For some reason, he kept all of his toys in the attic, and there was an alarm on the door, so we couldn't go up there. I remember my mother chiding me for believing him. Again, he lied a lot. But I remember wondering, why would anyone lie about something to their friend like that? And I remember the time Jonathan's cousin Rory stole my Chewbacca as I watched through the window. I remember him watching him taking it out of my Darth Vader action figure carrying case and putting it in his pocket. I remember telling my mother, and I remember how loath she was to tell Janet, his mother. I thought Janet was crazy. She scared me. And I remember from the way adults talked about Janet in hushed tones that they thought so too. I remember Janet saying she put the fear of God in Rory, so he was telling the truth when he said he didn't take it. I remember my mother not believing that, but pretending that she did. I remember her telling me that she would buy me another one tomorrow, and I remember thinking this wasn't the point. And I remember the first time I saw you. Jonathan brought you to my house to play. I remember how blonde your hair was and the depth of your blue eyes. How much more you looked like my mother's son than I did. I remember thinking that if I looked more like you, then people wouldn't be surprised when they met my tiny, blonde Australian mother. I remember Jonathan making a point of not letting me play with you, despite the fact that you were at my house and playing in my pool. I remember he brought all of his He-Man toys with him, those gross, misshapen, half-naked dolls that made my Princess Leia in combat culture look positively realistic. I hated all their muscles upon muscles and their silly little fur blind budgie smugglers. To me, they were the epitome of the difference between an action figure and a doll. I remember thinking that if you weren't going to play with me, I'd just hide from you both. I remember thinking it would be just like in Return of the Jedi. The plucky little Ewok would have played you in the cover of the woods. I remember Jonathan eventually realizing I wasn't around. I guess ignoring someone isn't that much fun when they're not there to see it. I remember climbing through the trees and across the roof of my house, watching you both trying to find me in vain, laughing at you from the treetops with Princess Leia. I remember having to go to the toilet and sneaking into the house. I remember Jonathan hearing the toilet flush and yelling, "He's inside!" I remember the sound of your feet, the pace you both ran. I remember thinking that I may still be able to sneak away. And I remember turning around and bam, colliding with you in our formal living room. I remember you landing on top of me. I remember being tangled in your limbs behind the sofa, the smell of furniture polish and the leather all around, your pale fingers wrapped around my wrists holding me down, your cherry Kool-Aid scented breath on my cheek, your face so close to mine, your lips moving, forming beautiful pink shapes. Shh, they whispered. He doesn't know where we are. So we just laid there, you on top of me under you, not moving, barely breathing. I remember how right it felt, how right you felt, and how confused I was by this feeling. I remember the sound of Jonathan's feet as he ran past without knowing we were in the next room. I remember the sound of them getting further and further away, hearing the porch door slam shut, knowing that I was safe again. We were safe. I remember wishing we could stay like this forever before you let me up, and how dangerous that felt. I remember turning to leave, and I remember you explaining that you thought Jonathan was a bully. I remember you saying that you would have preferred to play with me, just me. I remember you saying that you were going to ask your mother if I could come and play at your place next week. I remember you grabbing my arm as I tried to leave and handing me Leia. I remember our fingers touching as you plastered to me. I remember thinking you were a liar. I remember hoping that you weren't. Because boys like you didn't choose boys like me. They chose Jonathan. And I remember my mother getting the call to ask if I wanted to stay at yours for the weekend. I remember her being surprised. And I remember jumping up and down and silently saying, yes. I remember being afraid of your dad, Bruce, and his thick blonde mustache like straw. I remember thinking it was weird because none of the other dads had mustaches. I remember your dad drove a big black van like the one out of the A-Team, and I was slightly disappointed that your little brothers Chris and John came along with you to pick me up. I remember your dad telling us to put our seatbelts on, and I remember how strange that was. was, because nobody ever wore seatbelts back then. I remember we went to Chuck E. Cheese's for dinner. I remember that this was so much better than Jonathan's. Your father gave us quarters so that we could play video games. My dad never had quarters for video games. We played the Death Star trench game until we didn't have any more quarters left. I remember hovering over your shoulders you played and thinking how much you looked just like Luke. I remember thinking that I wish I looked like someone, anyone other than Lando Calrissian. I remember eating so much pizza, endless slices of pizza, and washing it down with sticky, sweet root beers. I remember thinking that I would never be able to sleep from all of the excitement. I remember thinking that I wanted to spend every weekend with you. And I remember thinking you felt the same. I remember how you shared your bedroom with your brothers. I thought that was weird too, because my brother and I had never shared a bedroom in our lives. You had a single bed and your brothers slept in bunk beds. I remember your brothers falling asleep quite quickly. And I remember you telling me that your mother had bought you Star Wars bed sheets especially for tonight. I remember shining a torch through the sheets and watching all of the characters light up in the darkness of your room. And I remember your dad bursting in and telling us to go to sleep already. I remember going to church with you the next day, the plain walnut paneling and the humble decorations, the decor of a carpenter. I remember how tight my tie was knotted around my neck and how uncomfortable my clothes felt in the glare of the fluorescent lighting, how unnatural all of this felt. I remember thinking, hadn't everything changed now? But of course, it hadn't. I remember Jonathan seeing me climb out of your father's van with you and your brothers. I remember how he turned and went straight inside. I remember how I felt ashamed, and so I ran off and hid behind my mother like I always did. And I remember that you brought me a gift when we were leaving for Australia. I remember how it made me feel inside. I felt loved. I felt seen, maybe for the first time. And I remember the look on Jonathan's face. I remember knowing that it was a Star Wars figure through the wrapping paper. I remember carefully unwrapping it, not really caring who it was, because all that mattered was that you bought it for me. I remember seeing the crimson color of an Emperor's Royal Guard as the paper came away. I remember thinking, how could you know how much I loved them? I never told you that, but somehow you knew. I remember watching Jonathan laughing and telling me that I already had one of those. I remember watching your smile fade, and I remember snapping at him. There were 6 in Return of the Jedi, and so now I only needed 4 more to have the right amount, so this was the perfect gift. And I remember whispering to you that they were my favorite. I remember thanking you, and I remember how you smiled at me, beamed at me actually. And I remember thinking how beautiful you were. And I remember thinking that things would be so different if I wasn't going to Australia, but not really knowing how. I remember thinking that I was going to miss you, or maybe I was missing out on something. And I remember, even after all this time, I still have the Royal Guard you bought me. It's a little faded now. His robe's frayed at the corner from playing. I guess we both are nowadays. I never got the other 4 to complete my set, but I remember the feeling you gave me when we were just 2 boys hiding behind a sofa on Long Island. Just 2 boys, the scent of furniture polish and tangled limbs. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I'm in the arms of other boys, when they hold me close, when I feel their breath on my face, when they lie on top of me and I think to myself, I never want this moment to end, I remember you. But you see, I can't after all this time, I can't remember your name.
Golnoosh was shortlisted for the Polari Prize for non-debuts for her short story collection, The Ministry of Guidance, and she's since published a poetry collection, Rock Song, and co-edited an anthology of LGBTQ plus writing. You've been very busy, Golnoosh.
I'm working on so many new things at the moment, so I'm going to read a few of my newer pieces tonight. This poem is called Sculptures, and it's the first poem in my poetry collection, Rock Song. Sculptures. But why do I have to explain? Why can't I just wear my blue lipstick and be ironic artsy, and eccentric? Why do I have to remind them what they've done to my land, or why sanctions are bad? Why do I have to be the teacher rising from the grave of politics? Why should I be the one shouting, we need transgression, darling, not progression, as though I were the chosen one? Why did I consume my youth in sad universities to confirm what I knew all along? To tediously intellectualize my instinct when I could have spent this time burning a bank or a church or even a mosque where dollar prays that queers will die? Why do I have to explain why a lunar boy in a dress who murmurs my art hardens his nipples makes my cunt jump? Why do I have to justify? Why can't I just open the picture of Dorian Gray, page 155? To define is to limit, and just stare as though I am gazing at Basil's painting, but instead I am the one aging. Why do I have to inform my father of my sex life when my mother, the sculptor, carved my flesh for years so I'd be as cultured as her dusty library, but she made me a bruised slut? Why did I desire her dead, like the ultimate Freudian cliche, so I could have my father to myself? But now that she's gone, my father and I are still apart, cutting each other, yielding blood, and we both think the fox that visits my girlfriend's garden is my mother. So now I would like to read some of my new short stories that I have not read before in public, and they haven't been published yet. They're both due for publication, hopefully this year. The first one I'm going to read from is a short story that I wrote. It was a commission for this new decadent anthology that's going to be published in Japan. You don't need to know much except the fact that the setting of this story is also Tehran. Ali recently turned 40 and he's dreading it. I don't want to become a fucking daddy and listen to all their tedious daddy issues before sex. Even the thought makes me sick. Daddy, another English word that has entered our conversations, although I do prefer the Farsi version, Baba. You'll always be a prince, I try to console him. He squeezes my hand. I'm so lucky I have you. Can you ask your mother about her skincare secrets? She doesn't look her age at all. When I asked my mother, she said it's because she has a dead husband and laughed. I then went searching on her vanity table when she was out. There were so many different brands, not one Iranian one, not a patriot when it comes to her skincare, my mother. I noticed the gilded domination of Estee Lauder. When I told Ali, although he was amused by my mother's reasons and me spying on her vanity table, he sighed. That's either hard to find here or very expensive. How about I steal some of my mom's? Ali burst into one of his childlike laughs. How? Easily, she has so many she won't even notice. So I stole one of my mother's night creams, the one that looked almost new. Ali adored his present. Darling, I don't know how to thank you. And he kissed my hand, which felt, well, sublime. My mother, of course, found out, and I was punished by her heavy leather slippers, but I'd rather not go there. The important thing is now Ali's face is as smooth as my mother's. He almost smells like my mother too. A dizzying mixture of cigarette smoke, expensive face cream, and the promise of violence. I can feel Ali smiling brightly at Nima just as I can feel Nima's stiff expression. They shake hands and Nima kisses my lips swiftly. My lips are so dry and cracked I want them to bleed. Blood is my favorite moisturizer. I recall this line from one of Ali's blog posts. A boy says this to another before proceeding to violently murder the other boy. Why was I so struck by this scene? Why did I feel I was the one being stabbed? And more importantly, why did I relish it? I then remember another time Nima said something about Ali that burned me. He must be a sick man to be writing this stuff. Why don't you join the regime and execute homosexuals then? I retorted. Go ahead. Oh, it has nothing to do with his sexuality. It's about violence, Nima said, staring into my eyes. It's honestly not about his sexuality. I myself enjoy homosexual sex as much as everybody else, even though I'm not gay. It's the brutality of the content of his blog that's disturbing. But how can you separate violence from sexuality? Because I'm healthy? Nima is so arrogant sometimes I want to beat him up. I don't even know him that well. We met during a pretentious play in the theater where I got so bored I was just looking for twins and other possibilities of fuck. Ali was sitting beside me pretending to enjoy it because it was directed by one of his potential boyfriends. Yet another rendition of Waiting for Godot. When we left the theater, Ali apologized to me in our private cab. You owe me, I told him. That was next level tedious. I know, my love. What do I owe you? I enjoy owing you things. Perhaps a kiss. I tried my luck. He swiftly kissed my cheeks. Sometimes you make me wish I were straight. I don't know, I confess, not accepting his compliment. I've never been attracted to straight men. I don't know what it is. Well, to begin with, they don't shower, Ali laughed, producing a bottle of perfume to refresh the scent on his neck. I could tell as he was laughing at straight men, he suddenly got worried about smelling like them. His window was open and the summer breeze spread his aroma through the whole car. The scent of bergamot and orange blossom filled my nostrils like cocaine. I looked at the cab driver, wondering whether he too was ecstatic by Ali's fragrance, but I could only see the back of his enormous head. I could feel that Ali was grateful to the driver for not trying to pull us into a repetitive conversation about politics and news. Outside our cab, Tehran was throbbing like an open wound. How I loved wounding this city and being wounded by it. The familiar sycamore trees looked gloriously green and heavy. The air seemed as gray as usual, the pollution as visible as me and Ali. It had its own personality and space. We were stuck in Valia Square traffic, and I was mesmerized by the black fumes of some exhausted cars. Our driver held out his head, shouting swear words at another driver for almost hitting our car. Ali and I exchanged theatrically horrified glances, both stifling a hysterical laugh. Oh, this story is called Sad Prince, but Sad Prince as one word. I'm going to read just another extract, 2 paragraphs from one of my other stories. This one is coming out in an anthology with Comma Press later this year. And it's a horror anthology, so this was also my first attempt at writing horror, but it's not horror in the conventional sense of the word, of course. It's just a little bit unsettling and disturbing, and not these 2 paragraphs that I'm going to read anyway. Actually, Paul, I would like to dedicate this one to you because I stole your your reference to Tom Ford Noir when I read it in your novel. Because that's also one of my favorite perfumes, and I was like, yeah, I need to use that in a story. Well, great poet steal. So in your novel, the closer I get, I love that novel so much. So this is from a story called Project Excitement, and my narrator is a woman called Catherine, with a K, not C. For Christmas a few months ago, I gifted myself a leather-bound notebook that has a small but strong golden lock to keep track of every man who excites me. I call it my project of excitement. My little notebook is the antithesis of healthy green juice. I added Daniel to the notebook when I first started noticing his surprising allure a few months ago. The only old man who's ever entered the diary. The rest of them are either my age, in their 30s, or even younger, 20s. They are mostly beautiful and vivacious. Sometimes I am wrong and superficial, adding someone to the diary only because they look good. But on further interactions, I realize something's missing. They don't excite me. They get eliminated. I write in my diary with a specific kind of soft pen that can easily erase itself. Some men just need to be erased. My special pen has made this task very easy, if not pleasant. When I return to my desk, Thomas pops in to say hello. He's been saying hello far too many times recently to really mean hello. I've started to see the hungry ulterior motive in his eyes, which is great, as I added him to my diary only a few weeks ago, when he hadn't even seen me yet. I added him to the diary when he first entered the firm. He works on a different floor of this hideous skyscraper. He deals with criminals and he looks like a beautiful criminal himself. He has mean dark eyes in a very symmetrical and clean-shaven face. His skin is flawless and he smells like a good bottle of Tom Ford, not the one I'm wearing, perhaps Noir. He seems like a bisexual foot fetishist who might commit murder by accident and then get away with it. This aspect of him excites me even though I'd rather not be the victim. It's also the aspect that makes me feel ambivalent about him. Sometimes I dislike him too much to really fancy him. There is something about him that I deeply mistrust. It could be his overly polished appearance. People who polish themselves too much are either concealing something ugly or are just hollow. I like a bit of edge. Daniel has that edge. He carries a mystery without being intimidating. But Thomas is most certainly sexy, and he's been at my desk every day just to say hello. Today, when he bared his psychotically white teeth in an attempt to smile, I flashed my recently polished teeth back at him. My skin must have been glowing from the aftermath of my masturbation, a blinding glow that no face cream can emulate. Thomas paused and said, "You look well, Catherine." "Thank you." I gazed into his eyes. "So do you, Thomas." So that's only 2 paragraphs from that story.
I want to read the rest of that.
I know. I hope it will be out soon. Like, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I can tell. I can't wait.
Actually, there will be another short story collection at one point, but this was for a commission from Comma Press, their new horror anthology. Well, it's actually horrors of capitalism, but also horror in general.
I'm going to go over to our third guest. Last year, Polari was on tour. We managed to tour in between lockdowns. And towards the end of the autumn, we were in Edinburgh. And I took the opportunity to go and visit my friend in Glasgow, a lovely man called Matt Bates, who I met many years ago when he was the book buyer for W.H. Smith Travel and was an early supporter of Polari and the Polari Prize. And I stayed with him for a few days. And while we were there one night, he started telling me about this wonderful debut book that Muswell Press would be publishing. And he later sent me a copy. And I started reading it and I was just completely blown away. It's just one of the most extraordinary debut novels I've read in such a long time. And the novel is called The Whale Tattoo and the author is Jon Ransom. Good evening, Jon.
Hi, thank you for that. That's really lovely to hear.
Can you tell us about the novel and then give us a taste of it, please?
The Whale Tattoo is about this lad who believes that death is chasing after him after this gigantic sperm whale washes up on the Norfolk coast and starts, telling him all these strange prophecies and things about his life and what's happening to him. So he decides to go home to the house at the point where he lives alongside this river to try and figure out, what's happening and what he should, do about his life. And he when he gets back, he starts up a long, he's had this long-term relationship with this fisherman called Tim Fish, and he falls back into this kind of this obsessive relationship with this man who he pretty much adores. And yeah.
There's a lot of sex in this book, isn't there? There's a lot, and it's very different. It's very different to the way that gay sex is often portrayed in literary fiction, where it's often portrayed in a very polite way, or it's dressed up as something else. And
yeah,
there's something very frank and almost brutal about it. Actually, he doesn't really have hang-ups about his sex, does he, or his sexuality?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that I wanted to write something that kind of represented the lads I grew up with in this kind of rural environment where they don't unpick themselves in the same way that I'd read in other books. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't, kind of like seen this idea about not sitting around and talking about why they're the way they are, but instead just, going with how they feel and not kind of having to explain themselves. So that was something that I was keen to kind of include in the book.
It was like nothing I've read before, really. But the one thing that it made me think of slightly was Brokeback Mountain, and it's just in the sense of the way that the relationships are not really named and that there's this sort of brutality about them sometimes. Could you give us a taste of it, please, John?
Okay. So this is a part fairly early on in the book. Okay. I refuse to look away. The woman has purple hair and dances like a blackbird around an empty goldfish bowl. She could be a remnant of something older, a trick conjured from a fairground tended on the edge of town in another time. Her shadow, dark as wet tar, is lagging behind under Friday night streetlight. I want her to be an illusion, to disappear. When she stops dead, I close the distance between us. You all right? Bent in half, she lifts the glass bowl off the pavement, cocks her head. Fuck off. And she steps over the river of piss Fish has made. Barking, mate, Fish says. Bollocks. He knocks at his forehead with his clenched fist, then goes back the way he came towards the Greenland, where we'd been drinking before Doug turned up. I lean onto the church railing, watching formless faces through fogged glass in the White Hart. A tall lad comes out with his mate, winks. All right, fella? All right, I say. I don't recognize him. Even when I dig around, it's useless. Whoever tall lad had been, now he's no one. They clear off down the street while the cold gets colder. When Fish comes back, still knocking away, he says, stupid, forgot my lighter. He loosely hangs his arm around my shoulder. Up for it? His breath is thick with beer, cigarettes, and trouble. I tell him I have to pick up my old man from the hospital in the morning. He pushes his hand down the front of my trousers, licks my cheek like a thirsty dog. Fuck off already, I say. He doesn't care about my old man. Mostly nobody does. Worn, I take Fish home and leave him face down on the mattress. I don't even pull off his trainers. He mumbles and it sounds like he's wounded, a soldier forgotten in a ditch. I want to lie down alongside and watch him for a time. That's fucked up. Outside, the night sucks me in, pavement wet and empty. At the Jewish cemetery, I stop. White knuckling the bars on the door, I take a look inside. These dirty red brick walls guard 16 broken headstones, chiseled with writing nobody can read. I am younger than I am now when the showman from the mart takes me to Sin. Saw him first on the waltzes with Birdie. We pay our money and climb into the worn carriage, leather seat hot from the lads before us. He lowers the steel bar, winks, says his name is Jimmy Bug, same as on the rounding boards above the ride. Then he spins us, fast, Birdie screaming, I'm gonna throw up. I'm still grinning when the ride ends, mesmerized by the light, the way it slides like water when I hold out my hand, dripping through my fingers, soaking me with color. We don't go far. Birdie is complaining about the rows of dirt, glass bowls half filled and yellowed. It's not right. I don't care about the fish that are more orange than gold. I'm going home, she says. All right. It doesn't matter because I'm watching Jimmy Bug go around and around. He's like Jesus walking on wooden water. The planks rise and fall madly, unable to topple him. He keeps hungry eyes on me, worrying the hard-on in my underpants, until I get back in the waltzer for another go. When he leans in to lock the bar down, his free hand reaches around the back of my head, grazing my hair with mean fingertips. He has a tattoo of the Virgin Mary on his neck. The ink is close enough to taste. Then everything gets blurred. After the ride slows to a stop, he tells his mate to take over for a time. Lighting a joint, he weaves through the rowdy fair, every so often turning back to see if I'm still trailing him. The noise gets left behind. I'm agitated. The kind of restlessness that reminds me I'm 15 years old, makes me hop from one trainer to the other, looking like I'm getting ready to run. In the Jewish cemetery, he is lit by the lamppost leaning over the wall, staining his skin yellow. This what you want? Jimmy Bug asks. His rough, red-knuckled hands work worn trouser buttons undone. I'm nodding. A ladder of dark, tangled hair appears, then disappears beneath the waistband of his underpants. He tugs them down to his knees, his big pale dick jutting out. Then I'm hunched over, vomit shooting out of my mouth, covering his stomach and dick. Fuck, and I leg it. He shrieks, you're a fucking dead cunt. The Virgin Mary makes me think about what it means to want. The rain comes harder now. I cross town onto John Kennedy Road, over train tracks, iron bars made redundant years before. On the other side, the Pilot Cinema is boarded up. Makes me think about Mum. Birdie and me sat either side watching the big screen, our tongues numb from strawberry ice cream. With dock lights behind, I near the river. Black rain makes it hard to find the line between water and bank. There's a voice beneath the tide that moves dangerously close. My bollocks are throbbing. I hum the nursery rhyme she taught me, but the water gets louder. The river speaks to me. It sounds like a box of wasps, swooshing, stirring, spinning lies until I can't stand it, and I know it's not telling me the truth. The river is a lying cunt.
You've got another short extract to read for us.
I can read another bit, yep.
Let's have another bit from you, and then we'll have the
cool.
full package then.
Yep. The air, heavy with moisture, turns his red hair to auburn in the half-light. Fish is wearing baggy black dungarees messed up with mud and shellfish. I get off Birdie's push bike, reluctant to let go of the handlebars. Could turn around and ride back out to the house. Leave Fish alone with his brother, Doug. You're late, mate. Yeah, sorry, I say. You all right or what? I'm good, I lie. I can't shake the bad feeling I have. What am I doing on the Anne-Marie, on this stretch of water? You've got a spare cigarette? Fish fumbles around in the front pocket of his dungarees, tosses me a crushed packet, followed by his lighter. Bash on, he says. There's gear for you over there. He takes a long look at my wet trainers, shakes his head. They won't do, mate. Takes his lighter back off me. The boat smells of hot diesel and sweat. I've not been on the Anne-Marie since Fish's old man died. There's something about the trawler that unsettles me, the way the fishermen talk without opening their mouths. Fish says it's because what happens on board stays on board, like their stupid superstitions. One time Fish scolded me for trying to bust open the buttons on his shorts, told me 2 men bumming on board's no different from having a woman wreck the trip. I don't know about that. I put on the dungarees, boots, and the coat he set aside for me. Doug asks, how's things? That same uneasy stare. I blow blue smoke into the air over his head. Not bad, you? He nods. Been better, he says, glancing at Fish. That right, fella? Nah, Fish says, we're good. Doug is nothing like Fish. Since we were boys, Doug has circled around me like I'm infectious or stink of dog shit. Fish says it's all in my head. I don't know why brothers pretend to be different from how they really are. It's not like that with Birdie. The fishing trawler moves to purpose. I hang back, leaning against the winch, watching the backs of the brothers' heads. The engine settles on a dull grind, cutting an easy path through the muddy river before heading out and onto open water towards blackguard sand on the outer roads. Here, the sea and sky are the same filthy grey, tidewater whirling. The sound of seabirds, great wing beats thunder overhead, seals surface, then dip beneath the wet. This is the way of shell fishing, the journey out, manoeuvring through a secret place I'm blind to, until we arrive at a patch of water that looks no different from the water on the horizon. But the air here crackles like static on the television, agitating me. We're anchored above what Fish promises is a shed load of catch. I consider how deep it runs, room enough for a gigantic whale. You'll see, Fish says, proud like a pirate. When he gets excited, his cheeks flush. They're the exact same shade of red they get when he fucks me, just before he comes on my belly. I sit on a heap of blue coiled rope, knees tucked underneath my chin. Doug and Fish have a sawn down half barrel apiece, with a plastic upturned crate for a table. Fish drinks a can of beer, Doug tea from a warm yellow plastic flask. I don't want either. We all eat cheese and ketchup sandwiches Doug's missus made the night before, bread stale and sauce congealed. Fit for the birds circling overhead. I chew, listen to them talk hurriedly about quotas, then in more hushed voices about where the shellfish and shrimp are good, like I care. Doug says, heard your old man died, and now my bollocks start to ache properly. Jesus, Fish said. Not yet, I say. I think Doug looks amused, but it's hard to see the line of his mouth beneath his beard. He gets up, goes to the wheel and guns the engine. He maneuvers the boat in a big circle, makes one hell of a racket, sending seagulls skywards. The prop churns up the muddy seabed. Engine cuts out and the silence is bigger than the space around us. Won't be long, Doug says, tosses a rake over. I barely catch it in time. We're waiting for the Anne-Marie to ground on the mudbank with the ebbing tide in the estuary. Sat beside Birdie at the Lido. I'm waiting for Fish to turn up. She's found a piece of concrete livid with sunshine to put our towels against. Boiling, I say, using my t-shirt to collect the sweat hounding my forehead. Go in the water then, she says. Nah, I'm agitated. Haven't seen fish since we broke up from school 3 days before. What'll happen now we don't ever have to go back? From here, the pool looks wild. Doug and his trawler mates are messing about, taking turns trying to drown each other. Even though they're twats, I like looking at them, slinging shiny globs of water all over the place. Once in a while, I catch Fish's brother eyeing us up. I reckon Doug fancies you. Birdie doesn't even open her eyes. He's a cunt, she says. I'm going in. You should. The river water washes the heat away. I have my elbows hooked against the edge of the pool, hanging there. Doug backs away from his mate, comes close enough to hear me. All right, I say. He looks over his shoulder. Fish coming? No, mate, he says. He's working. Working? That's what I said. You'll have to find someone else to play with. Then he disappears beneath the surface. I hope he fucking drowns. And I climb out of the water. Lie back down on my towel. And, Birdie says, it's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing. You're right, I say. Doug's a cunt.
And that's a wonderful note to end on.